I was signing the paperwork for the cabin we'd rented to celebrate our first anniversary when my phone rang. The detective asked if I was sitting down. He told me my wife, Hannah, had been found dead in her apartment. The official cause was an overdose. I remember laughing for a second because I thought it had to be some mistake. Hannah hated taking medicine. She barely swallowed aspirin when she had a headache. Then the detective said her full name again. Everything after that felt like someone else's life. For months, I drifted through every day without really living. I quit returning calls. I stopped answering the door. My brother finally convinced me to see a grief counselor named Melissa. She listened more than she talked. After nearly 6 months, she told me something that made me angry. "You aren't grieving," she said. "You're hiding." I wanted to argue, but she wasn't wrong. She suggested I spend a weekend at a silent wellness retreat in the mountains of western Montana. No phones, no internet, just hiking, meditation, and reflection. The place was called Stone Hollow. It wasn't cheap, but she insisted the isolation would force me to confront whatever I had buried. A week later, I arrived. Only 5 guests had signed up. There was an older man who never smiled, a young woman named Erin who looked exhausted, a married couple celebrating their retirement, and me. Our guide introduced himself as Lucas. He spoke softly and somehow always sounded like he already knew the answer to every question. "The mountains don't create guilt," he told us. "They simply refuse to hide it." The words bothered me more than they should have. The first day passed quietly. We hiked through thick pine forests and stopped beside a small alpine lake before setting up camp. Everyone kept mostly to themselves. That night, I woke to footsteps circling my tent. Slow. Careful. Crunch. 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 I unzipped the entrance and shined my flashlight outside. Nothing. Just trees. As I turned to go back inside, I noticed muddy footprints leading away from my tent. Only they didn't come toward it, they started at my tent. As if someone had walked away, or something had walked out. The next morning, nobody mentioned it. During breakfast, Erin refused to look at me.
Every time I caught her staring, she'd immediately glanced away. Later that afternoon, she finally walked beside me. "I know what happened," she whispered. Before I could ask what she meant, Lucas called everyone together. She hurried away without another word. That evening, I found a folded photograph inside my backpack. It showed Hannah and me standing beside a river during our honeymoon. Except someone had drawn a thick black X over my face. On the back were 4 words. "You never told them." My stomach dropped. Nobody knew. Nobody could know. The night Hannah died, we'd argued for hours. She had discovered I'd been lying about money. I'd secretly emptied our savings trying to cover gambling debts. She stormed out of the apartment. I followed her into the parking garage. She was crying. She pushed me away. I grabbed her wrist. She stumbled backward against the concrete barrier. Her head struck the edge with a sound I'll never forget. She wasn't unconscious. She kept trying to say something. Instead of calling for help immediately, I panicked. Nearly 15 minutes passed before I dialed 911. I told police I'd found her already injured. The doctors couldn't save her. The investigation ruled the overdose they found in her system had caused her to lose balance before the fall. Nobody questioned my story. At least, I thought they didn't.
That night I couldn't sleep. Around 3 in the morning I heard voices outside. Lucas was speaking quietly. He still believes he escaped judgment. Someone answered. A woman's voice. It sounded exactly like Hannah. I ran. I didn't stop to pack. Branches tore at my clothes as I stumbled through the darkness. Just after sunrise, I reached a Forest Service station. A ranger opened the door and immediately asked if I was okay. I told her everything. Stone Hollow. Lucas. The guests. The photograph. The voices. She listened patiently before opening a map. There hasn't been a retreat here in over 8 years, she said. The property burned down. I stared at her.
That's impossible. She shook her head. It was abandoned after the fire. I pulled the photograph from my pocket. My hands were shaking. I handed it to her. She frowned. Sir? She turned the paper toward me. It wasn't a photograph anymore. It was a completely blank sheet. I started screaming. They took me to the hospital that afternoon. The psychiatrists called it a guilt-induced psychotic episode. Days turned into weeks. The medication slowly peeled away everything I'd experienced at Stone Hollow. Lucas, Aaron, the retreat. None of it had ever existed. Eventually, I confessed what really happened in the parking garage. The investigators reopened the file, but found no evidence strong enough to change the original ruling. Legally, I remained a free man. Mentally, I never left that mountain. My therapist says guilt can build entire worlds if you give it enough time. I believe her. Because every now and then, when the room is completely silent, I still hear slow footsteps circling my bed. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Always stopping just outside the darkness, waiting for me to finally tell the truth.
My wife, Lauren, and I had been married for 5 years, but somewhere along the way, we'd started living on separate schedules. She worked nights as an emergency room nurse. I managed a construction company that practically owned my weekdays. Some weeks, we'd only see each other for 15 minutes before one of us had to leave again. So when she unexpectedly got 4 days off in a row, we agreed to disappear somewhere neither of us had cell service. We booked a small cabin outside the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. The owner handed us a paper map when we checked in. He circled a trail leading to an abandoned fire lookout. Best view in the county, he said. Just don't stay after sunset. I laughed, assuming he was trying to make the place sound mysterious. Saturday morning, we packed water, sandwiches, and started hiking. The trail was beautiful. Towering pines surrounded us, the air smelled like rain, and for the first time in months, we weren't talking about work. About 3 hours in, Lauren noticed something strange. Every trail marker we'd passed during the last mile had been facing the wrong direction. The painted arrows pointed back toward where we'd come from instead of farther up the trail. Someone had physically turned them around. We joked that another hiker must have been playing a prank. Then we reached the old fire lookout. Only, there wasn't a tower. The clearing was empty. Just cracked concrete where something had obviously stood decades ago. Before either of us could say anything, we heard a whistle. One long note. Then another. A man stepped out from between the trees. He wore an old forest ranger uniform, faded almost gray with age. His boots were covered in dried mud. His face looked unusually pale. "You shouldn't be here," he said calmly. "The trail closes before evening." checked my watch. It wasn't even 3 o'clock. "We'll head back now," I told him. He nodded slowly. Then he looked directly at Lauren. "Stay close to him." The way he said it made my stomach tighten. We started back down the trail without another word. After maybe 10 minutes, Lauren stopped walking. "Do you hear that?" At first, I didn't. Then, footsteps. Not behind us. Beside us. Moving through the woods at exactly the same speed we were. Whenever we stopped, they stopped. Whenever we walked, they matched us perfectly. I called out. No answer. Just silence. We picked up the pace. The footsteps did too. A few minutes later, we rounded a bend and froze. Standing in the middle of the trail was a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 8. She wore an old yellow raincoat. Her bare feet were filthy. Her long black hair completely covered her face. "Sweetheart," Lauren called gently. "Are you lost?" The little girl slowly lifted one hand and pointed into the forest. "My mommy is waiting." Neither of us moved. She pointed again. "She said you're late." Lauren whispered that something felt wrong. I agreed. I told the little girl we'd call for help once we got back to town. She didn't answer. Instead, she smiled. Not with her mouth, with the shape of her cheeks beneath the hair. Then she turned and walked into the trees. The footsteps beside us suddenly stopped. The silence became unbearable. We hurried downhill as fast as we safely could. Then we heard another whistle, this time much closer. The forest ranger was standing behind us. Except, he hadn't made a sound walking there. "I told you, don't answer them." I asked who he was talking about. He looked toward the woods. "They always send the child first." Lauren grabbed my arm. Dozens of small footprints were appearing in the damp soil around us. Not ahead, not behind, around us, as if invisible children were circling us. The ranger suddenly shouted, "Run!" We didn't hesitate. Branches whipped across our faces as we sprinted downhill. Behind us came the sound of children laughing. Not one. Hundreds. The laughter echoed through every direction at once. I never looked back. When we finally reached the parking lot, the ranger was nowhere to be seen. Neither were the footprints. The sheriff met us an hour later. After listening to everything, he asked one question. "Did the ranger have a silver badge?" I said yes. His expression changed immediately. He opened a file on his computer and turned the screen toward us. It showed an old newspaper clipping. The photograph was unmistakable. The same ranger. Same face. Same uniform. He died during a wildfire rescue in 1987. The sheriff explained that over the years, dozens of hikers had reported meeting him before getting lost. None of them ever saw him again after reaching safety. Lauren and I never returned to those mountains. Sometimes we still talk about that little girl. Sometimes we wonder what would have happened if we'd followed her into the trees. But the question that keeps me awake isn't who she was. It's why something that died nearly 40 years ago was still trying to save strangers from whatever was waiting deeper in those woods.